Let's begin. Again, I'd like to welcome you all to the IEU's B.29 virtual side event on the independent rapid assessment of the Green Climate Fund's request for proposals modality. My name is Elangtlhoko Mokgano. That's a mouthful, but yeah. And I will be your moderator for this afternoon. Our side event will last for an hour. It'll begin with a short presentation from our presenters, Mr. Andreas Reumann and Daisuke Horikoshi. And after that, we will have a Q&A question. Just on some housekeeping rules, I would like to implore you to keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation, as well as when you are not speaking. We will have a Q&A question, but if you have any questions, kindly type them in our chat box. And during our Q&A session, I will give the floor to those who would like to ask their questions virtually. Simply raise your virtual hand and I will give you the floor. I will now hand over to our presenters.
Thank you, Elang. So also a warm welcome from my side to this official IEU B29 board side event. So this time around, we're presenting to you the conclusions and recommendations of the rapid assessment of the GCF's request for proposals, as Elang has already explained. My name is Andreas Reumann. I'm currently the head ad interim of the Independent Evaluation Unit. And today I'm also joined by my colleague, the IEU Evaluation Specialist, Daisuke Horikoshi, who's also been a task lead for this evaluation. Next slide, please. So for today, we're planning to walk you through the background, the key findings and conclusions and recommendations of the independent rapid assessment of the GCF's RFPs. So this presentation will take about 15 minutes and will be followed by a Q&A session where we would like to invite you all to ask questions or make additional remarks on the request for proposals and or the review that we have been undertaking. So next slide, please. To start off, I would like to share with you the schedule for this evaluation as it has been outlined in the approach paper. So we have completed the different phases that you see here on the right-hand side. So that is the inception phase, the data collection phase, the report preparation phase until the report writing. And we have subsequently also submitted and finished this. And subsequently, we've also submitted to the board in time for B29 the final evaluation report. Since then, it has also been published online on our IEU website. So I encourage you to go to the IEU's website and download the document if you so wish and read through a very interesting, but generally speaking, a lot shorter report than our usual evaluation reports. So next slide, please. The evaluation team for this task is constituted by Daisuke, Elang, and Victoria, who are all here today from the IEU, as well as Claudio, Margarita, and Sarah from our consultancy firm Bastel, also here today in this call. Next slide, please. So to give you a bit of a background for this assessment, the framework for this assessment is structured around a set of key areas and questions. So an excerpt of the evaluation matrix is provided here on your right-hand side, and you can see all the 4 key areas that we have outlined in the evaluation matrix. So the key areas are the relevance of the RFPs in context of the GCF and the country needs, the implementation fidelity, the value added that the RFPs present in context of the GCF and the GCF business model, and also on how we're learning and how the learning has been integrated in the request for proposal and the process for the RFPs itself. Based on this framework, the evaluation has then addressed 3 main aspects. So the first aspect has been the RFPs as a modality as a whole. So the question of the modality aspect of the request for proposals. Secondly, we've also looked at a main aspect that is the RFP as a process for targeted project generation through the focusing on specific topics. And lastly, as well, its strategic use in tackling certain gaps in the portfolio and the business model. But there are also several aspects that are outside of the scope of this evaluation. So the evaluation does not assess each of the individual pilot programs, nor does it discuss the potential future areas for the request of proposals. So we felt that was important to point out here in the beginning, so that there's no misperception of what we are going to present. So next slide, please. So before I move over to my colleague Daisuke, let me briefly introduce to you the 4 pilot programs under the RFPs that the GCF has operationalized since 2015. So, and you see all 4 of them here. So the first one, EDA, the GCF board approved an initial allocation of $200 million for 10 pilot funding proposals adopting an enhanced direct access implementation modality. The direct access entities nominated by the countries can submit proposals to the fund, which include private sector institutions or public sector institutions, non-governmental organizations operating at any level in the country, which means subnational, national, and as well regional. This is the only RFP that's still active. The second RFP is, or the second RFP here in the pilot program is the MSME pilot program. This program was established as part of the private sector facility and aims to support micro, small, medium-sized enterprises in addressing mitigation and adaptation challenges. The program seeks to encourage strong proposals from the private sector investments in support of these MSME climate activities from new as well as from existing partners for innovative solutions. Thirdly, the MFS seeks to identify innovative and high impact projects and programs that mobilize private sector investments in climate change activities. So for this one, up to $500 million have been allocated by the GCF board for mobilizing the mobilizing funding at scale pilot program. Since its issuance in 2017, the GCF Secretariat has received over 350 ideas for climate projects. And last but not least, the GCF has also accepted concept notes and funding proposals as part of its pilot program for REDD+ results-based payment. So the 5-year pilot marks a major milestone for the fund support of REDD+ initiatives. This pilot program follows a decision of the 18th GCF board meeting in October 2017 to pilot REDD+ results-based payment consistent with the Warsaw framework for REDD+ and other REDD+ decisions under the UNFCCC. So let me also draw your attention to the very right-hand side, which shows you the approved projects. So you see that for EDA, we have currently 2 GCF board approved projects. For the MSME, we have 3. For MFS, we have 5. And for the pilot program for REDD+ results-based payment, we have 8 projects. So you see from the get-go here and from this background already that there's a very limited number of projects that have resulted from the request of proposals. So and now without further ado, I hand over to my colleague Daisuke, who will introduce the key findings and conclusions and recommendations based on our evaluation report. Over to you, Daisuke.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for your introduction. Now, I will walk you through our key findings from our data analysis. This table shows the status of 4 pilot programs as of 2020, after March 2021, after B.28. If we look at the portfolio of EDA RFP, only 2 out of the original target 10 projects approved through EDA pilot programs. Therefore, this pilot programs has the low commitment, but demonstrates faster disbursements. MFS committed half of the allocated funds so far, but the progress of the disbursement is quite low, 6%. MSME committed 60% of initial allocates 100 million amounts for its first phase, and 43% of the committed amount has been disbursed so far. REDD plus result-based payment envelope has been fully committed with a 64% of the fund disbursed, given the fact that result-based payments are disbursed at the beginning of the project. Next, please. Also, I'm sorry, can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. Our additional portfolio analysis shows no particular focus or trend observed as a single modality. Also, the focus comes through topics relevant to GCF mandate and the country needs. And the GCF had no financial set aside for the RFP as a modality, but there are the indicative amounts for the 4 pilot programs. Next, please. Then, when we compare the time taken by the project through RFP window versus those through the regular funding windows, there is no significant difference observed. The time taken of the project through RFP is similar to that of the regular funding proposal window. MFS project took even longer to process the concept notes, or project took at least 2 years, while the approval process of REDD plus result-based payment project is slightly shorter than regular projects. This is because the approval process for the RFP project follow the same business model. MFS encounter accreditation challenges at concept node stage. The entity needed to be accredited to proceed with next stage. The process of REDD plus result-based payment improved over time with the improved templates. This is one of the learning aspect of the RFP modality. Next, please. This table shows the key achievements and the weakness gap of each pilot program identified by the portfolio analysis. EDA contributed to attract direct access entity-led project in SITS and Africa, but only 2 projects approved so far, and no new entity reached GCF by this pilot program. MFS actually attracted over 300 concept notes while mobilizing private sector actor, and 5 approved projects have higher co-financing ratios compared with the regular PSF project, which is one of the intent of this pilot program. But those projects are less focused on adaptation, and there is no pure adaptation project approved by the project private sector approved in the current portfolio. The project through MSME targeted local MSME players on the ground effectively, but it is still unclear whether the project contributes to innovation and new technology, which is one of the key criteria in the scorecard of this pilot program. The initial envelope for REDD plus result-based payment is fully committed. Implementation of result-based payment for REDD plus could not have been funded without this RFP. But the accredited entities of 8 approved projects are all UN organization, and most of the projects are in Latin America, and the initial envelope is insufficient to adequately fund this sector. Next, please. Then these findings will lead us to the conclusion. When we have to consider that there are 2 aspects when we think about the function of RFPs at GCF: RFP as a modality to access GCF, and RFPs as a tool for targeted project program generation to address the portfolio gap. As a modality, we conclude there is no RFP modality per se and mechanism per se established at the GCF, but rather there are 4 individual RFP pilot programs. And the implementation of the RFP did not succeed at overcoming the shortcomings of GCF business model to make it more accessible to national entities and the private sector. The RFPs didn't provide an incentive to proponent regarding project cycle or accreditation. Therefore, the current GCF RFP is not suitable to address business model challenges at the GCF. Next, please. As for another aspect, RFP as a tool to fill in the portfolio gap or attract targeted project, we conclude the selected topics of RFP are relevant to GCF mandate and the country needs, although these are not selected systematically. The RFP generally provided the GCF with a tool for target project generation, but the RFPs were not used effectively as the current small portfolio shows. The objective of RFP is to help fill in gap in climate change financing landscape is not fully achieved. For example, the RFPs for the private sector don't result in attracting many adaptation projects from private sector. There's no clear linkage observed between RFP launched and the portfolio gap analysis. There are no further specification on the business continuity or exit strategy of RFP after each pilot program ends. RFP implementation has little relevance for learning, scaling up and scaling and replication. Also, the human and the finance resource used for developing and implementing the RFPs at the secretariat are not sufficient and are uneven. To date, the RFPs have not achieved a significant outcome due to the limited size of current portfolio and early stages of the project. The achievement of the RFP will be largely limited to those of each individual project. Overall, RFP is suitable to address portfolio gaps at GCF, but the limited achievement so far. Next. Then I will walk you through the key recommendations drawn from these conclusions. Our recommendation extend across 3 levels with different time frames. Operation or process level with the short term, the recommendation at the modality level to be addressed relatively medium term and long term strategic level recommendations. In terms of the recommendations in the short term for the process level, that GCF should continue to consider RFPs as a tool for targeted project program generation and focus investment on specific themes with clear articulation of the purpose and the objectives of the RFP. Regarding the selection of the topics for RFPs, the GCF should follow a transparent and strategic approach to identify future topics and the themes. Selection of the topic for RFP should be evidence-based and have clear linkage with prior analysis, including portfolio gap analysis and market analysis and portfolio prediction. Next, please. The GCF also should consider designing a standardized RFP process based on universally recognized good practice outside GCF and on the theory of change with well-defined assumption internally. The RFP at the GCF should improve their predictability, transparency, and consistency, as well as incentivize the participation of the right actors that include having funding cap per project, timeline, the standard business timeline of the entire process, and the clear eligibility and the target theme of each RFP. Next, please. And to operationalize RFP as a modality to access GCF, firstly, GCF should consider institutionally establishing the RFP as a modality with internal guidance on how to prepare RFPs. The GCF Secretariat should identify internal structure to centrally coordinate, review, and appraise the design and implementation of RFP. Likewise, the Secretariat has a one function for standard simplified approval process. Next, please. Then strategically, in the long term, GCF should assess and clarify the purpose and the use of RFP in relation to the business model. The GCF should improve the GCF business model to provide incentive for proponent to participate and increase the effectiveness for RFP as a modality. Such incentives may include more tailored technical supports and providing simplified accreditation process, and then providing align the secretary and ITAP review to the relevant topic of RFP. That's secretary or GCF already conducted for REDD plus result-based payments. And also, last but not least, fast tracking the process of proposal would be necessary. This ends my presentation today, and happy to answer your question or hear from your comments. Thank you. Back to you, Ilan.